we talk about the 1962 India-China War. The story is usually a simple one, a shocking, out-of-the-blue betrayal. But the real story, well, it's a lot more complicated. It's about a conflict that had been brewing for decades, all thanks to a border that was never really a border at all. So was it really a sudden stab in the back? Or was the war of 1962 a slow-motion disaster, a catastrophe that was years, even decades in the making? What if the real triggers were hidden in plain sight, on dusty old maps and in diplomatic handshakes? That's exactly what we're going to deconstruct. You see, to get to the bottom of 1962, you have to go way back. This whole mess wasn't new. It was actually a problem inherited from the British Empire, a kind of messy, unresolved piece of colonial paperwork that was basically a blueprint for future conflict. And here's the crucial part. It was never just one border dispute. It was two completely separate problems. In the east, you had the McMahon Line. The British drew it, Tibet agreed, but China, nope, never accepted it. Then in the west, you have the Aksai Plateau, a huge, strategic piece of land that even India's own early maps just called undefined. So you've got two very different issues, both just ticking away like time bombs. Okay, so let's jump forward to the 1950s. This is the decade famous for its supposed friendship between India and China. But here's the paradox. While everyone was chanting friendly slogans, both countries were quietly making moves that were putting them on an absolute collision course. I mean, you've probably heard the slogan, Hindi Chini bye bye. Indians and Chinese are brothers. It was everywhere. It really captured the public mood. You had leaders talking about Asian solidarity, peaceful coexistence. It felt like a new era of optimism. And they even signed a big treaty to prove it, the 1954 Panchsheel Agreement. It was all about these 5 amazing principles of peaceful coexistence. Mutual respect, non-aggression, all the right words. It sounded perfect, but it had one single fatal flaw.
Can you believe it? For all its fancy language about respecting each other's territory, the agreement never actually said where that territory was. It completely failed to define the border. Think about that. Both sides signed a deal to respect a line that neither of them had agreed on. It was a diplomatic disaster just waiting to happen.
And while the diplomats were silent, the actions on the ground were deafening. In 1954, the same year as that treaty, India just went ahead and changed its official maps, drawing a hard line claiming all of Aksai. At the very same time, China was physically building a massive highway right through the middle of that exact same territory. And the craziest part? India had no idea. They literally found out about a 1,200-kilometer highway from a Chinese newspaper. It just shows you who really had control on the ground. So the highway is discovered, tensions are sky high, and diplomacy gets one last shot to prevent a total catastrophe. This was it, the final off-ramp before the crash became inevitable. By 1959, the mood had turned ugly. After the Tibetan uprising, the letters flying back and forth between the leaders got angrier and angrier. Any trust that was left was pretty much gone. So in 1960, the Chinese premier Zhou Enlai flew to Delhi with what seemed like a really practical solution. He called it a package deal. Basically, it was a straight swap. He said, look, we'll accept the McMahon Line in the east, you guys can have Arunachal Pradesh. In return, you accept our control of Aksai in the west, where, let's be honest, we've already built a highway. It was a classic quid pro quo. Let's just make the existing reality on the ground official. But India said no, flat out rejected it. The Indian government was completely inflexible. They demanded that China withdraw from every single inch of territory that India claimed on its maps, and they weren't willing to give up anything in return. And just like that, the diplomatic road to peace was closed for good. With the talks dead, things shifted from the negotiating table to the border itself. And at this point, the policies both sides put in place made a fight almost guaranteed. In 1961, India kicked off its forward policy. The name sounds innocent enough, but the plan was anything but. The goal was to send soldiers to set up tiny military posts deep inside the disputed territory, sometimes right behind Chinese positions, to physically force the issue and assert their claims. It was an incredibly provocative move. At first, China's response was restrained. They called it armed coexistence. They matched India's new posts, man for man, but gave their soldiers strict orders not to shoot first. But then came the flashpoint, the Dola Post.
India set it up just north of where the McMahon Line was drawn on the map. For China, that was the last straw. On October 20th, 1962, the PLA launched a huge, coordinated invasion. The war had begun. The fighting stopped about a month later when China just declared a ceasefire and pulled back. But the war didn't solve anything. It didn't create a real border. All it created was a legacy of bitterness, mistrust, and a tense new reality that we're all still living with.
And the most tangible piece of that legacy? It's the line of actual control, the LAC. Let's be clear, this is not an international border. It's a ceasefire line. It's the scar left behind by that war, a vaguely drawn line on the map that separates two armies to this very day.
And this is why all that history really matters, because those failures, those missed opportunities from the 50s and 60s are the direct ancestors of the conflicts we see in the headlines today. Every standoff in Ladakh, the tragic clash in the Galwan Valley back in 2020, all the military buildup, it all traces right back to those colonial lines and the absolute failure of diplomacy to sort them out. Which leaves us with one final, really unsettling question. With a history this tangled, this full of mistrust and missed chances, can the line of actual control ever truly become a line of actual peace? That is the question that still hangs unanswered over the Himalayas.